When I was 10 years old, I lived in Mesa, Arizona. One night, I was walking home from a friend's house. It was already dark, and I was only a few minutes from home when I heard someone call my name. It was a woman I recognized as one of my mum's acquaintances. She told me my mum had an emergency and had asked her to give me a ride home. At first, I believed her. She even mentioned her husband, who my family also knew. But something didn't feel right. My stomach turned, and my legs started to shake. When I asked if we could call my mum, she insisted my mum was in the hospital and that we needed to hurry. Just as I was about to get into their car, I suddenly heard my mum shout my name from down the street. I ran to her immediately. The woman tried to explain that she was just helping me home, but I told my mom exactly what she had said. My mom's face went pale. She looked the woman in the eye and said, "You were trying to take my son." The couple quickly drove off. Later, we learned that the husband had been arrested for some very disturbing things, even had photos of me saved on his computer. To this day, I think about how different my life would be if I hadn't stopped to ask questions, or if my mum hadn't followed her instincts. That night changed me forever. Never ignore that gut feeling anymore.
About 10 years ago, I was recently divorced and living alone in a small one-bedroom apartment. It was clean, safe, and even had a doorman. For the first time in a while, life felt good. I was free from my clingy ex, focusing on my career and enjoying independence. But soon, strange things started happening. I'd wake up and find my door unlocked, even though I knew I had locked it the night before. At first, I blamed it on exhaustion, but it kept happening. Then, I noticed little things going missing: a hairbrush, nail polish, even some photos. Over time, it escalated. The most disturbing was when my clothes started disappearing. That's when paranoia set in. Every night, I made it a ritual. Lock the door, turn the handle 3 times, and say to myself, "It's locked, it's locked, it's locked." Yet almost every morning, the door was open again. Finally, I bought a video camera. I hid it under some towels, pointed at the door. That night, I double-checked the lock and went to sleep. The next morning, everything looked normal. But when I checked the footage, my blood ran cold. Hours passed with nothing, and then the doorknob shook. Slowly, the door creaked open. A man slipped inside, paused, then stepped fully into view. It was the building's maintenance man. His thick glasses, curly hair, there was no mistaking him. He casually walked around my apartment, then out of sight, straight into my bedroom. Terrified, I called the police. 2 officers arrived, and when they saw the tape, their faces went pale. They assured me I was safe, and one officer stood outside while I tried to rest. But lying in bed, something hit me. On the tape, we saw him come in, but never leave. Frozen with fear, I sat up. My feet touched the floor and I felt warm breath on my ankles. I bolted out the door, screaming for the officer. Backup rushed in. They found the maintenance man hiding under my bed, clutching a camera. And something much worse. A couple decides to go out and hires a babysitter to watch their young child. The babysitter gets bored and chooses to experiment with something she shouldn't have, but ends up taking way too much. Later in the night, the parents decide to call in to check on their kid. The sitter answers and says, "Yeah, everything is fine. The turkey is in the oven." The parents find it odd but brush it off for a little while, then head home a bit earlier, eager to see their bundle of joy. They walk into the house only to find all the lights out except for the dim glow of the oven. They open it and are struck by a scene so disturbing it scars them forever. The babysitter was found the next morning in a neighbor's backyard, totally unaware of the nightmare she had caused. It's said that if you drive down Butter Street at exactly 3 a.m., you can summon the hitchhiker. If you play the game right, he'll answer one question no one else could ever answer. If you mess it up, you don't come back. I tried it once. I followed every rule car on at midnight. Headlights off, doors unlocked 3 times. The street was empty, dead silent. Then I heard it, a car door shutting behind me. A man's voice said, "Bad night for rain." I forced out the answer I'd memorized. "Is there ever a good night?" He laughed. That's when I knew I wasn't alone anymore. The ride felt endless. The streets were deserted, the world outside completely still. I only looked at him through the mirror. Red jacket, wet jeans, a young man's body, but a voice that felt wrong. At 3:33, he leaned close. Cold breath touched my neck. "This is me, up here," he whispered, but there was nothing ahead, just an old gravel pit. "Do you have a question for me?" he asked. I meant to ask only one, but the word slipped out. Is she at peace? Does she blame me? That's when I realized my mistake. 2 questions. The rules allow only one. In the mirror, his face had vanished. Only black, endless eyes stared back at me. "She's not at peace," he said. "And she does blame you." When I looked up, I was back on Butter Street, parked at the edge of the pit, one hand resting on the brake. Maybe the cars at the bottom aren't from people who failed the game. Maybe they're from people who got the answers they never wanted to hear. They called it the suicide room, room 733. When I moved into college, I was placed in 734, right next door. My best friend Lydia was my roommate, which made it easier to ignore the strange looks whenever someone mentioned our floor. No one stayed in 733. Too many suicides, they said. At first it was just a story, but then the noises started. Footsteps in the middle of the night. The sound of glass tapping against the wall. Once, I swore I saw light under the door, even though the room had been locked for years. Lydia laughed it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling we weren't alone. One night, I heard her whispering. I thought she was on the phone, but when I looked, she was facing the wall, murmuring to someone I couldn't see. After that, she changed. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating, spent hours staring at the door of 733. Then one morning, she was gone. They told me she must have jumped, just like all the others. Now I live alone in 734. At night, I hear the lock on 733 clicking open, and I wonder how long before the room calls for me too.
I was taking back roads. I'd never driven when I stumbled on a tiny town and a little bookstore that was really someone's house. A cardboard box on the porch read 50-cent books. I stopped to dig for a Stephen King. A middle-aged woman answered the door with a huge smile, and weirdly, a bowl of fruit and a steaming cup of tea. She kept refilling my cup and kept bringing out brownies and cookies. I thought she was just being hospitable. I didn't notice how hazy I felt at first. The house was full of strange, beautiful art books. She left me to browse and told me to take my time. Later, I wandered through the hallway to pay and found her in the bedroom, in bed, watching something on a small TV. At the time, I thought it was an exercise video. Later, I realized what it really was. She'd been making small comments about kids in college, and the smile didn't feel friendly anymore. When I finally left, the town looked unreal. A fire engine screaming past, orange glow on the horizon, swallowing the stars. A tall man on a horse stood in the road and said, "Town's burnin'," like that was perfectly normal. I was so out of it, I could barely walk. I somehow managed to drive home on narrow coastal roads, nearly on the wrong side of the lane twice. Once, I only missed a truck by inches. I'm not a drug person, but whatever she slipped me sent me somewhere else for hours. Later, I pieced it together. I'd spent 4 hours in a tiny house that felt like a different world. 4 hours I can't fully remember. 4 hours I hope I was just looking at books. But sometimes when the wind hits a certain way and a memory flashes, I wonder what else I missed on that porch. I'm not supposed to touch anyone, that's been the rule, as long as I can remember. Mostly, my earliest memories are of my aunts and uncles, smiling at me behind glass in their white coats, of air hugs and blown kisses. But I have distant memories of another place, of men with guns, of a woman with a touch like silk. I think she was my mother. I remember a blinding light and a sound like thunder. The next thing I knew, I was here. I've been behind glass for a long time. No windows to see outside. No door in or out, only a slot for meals. All my uncles and aunts have grown old and grey, yet I don't seem to change. They never answered my questions. Who am I would ask. Where do I come from? All they ever told me is that I was sick, that I had to be kept locked away for my own safety until a cure was found. Even though I felt fine, I trusted them. I had no choice. I've had all I ever needed here. I've read hundreds of books, learned to paint and draw, watched hours and hours of Gilligan's Island. But what I always wanted more than anything was to touch someone, even for a second. I tried, once. A few years ago, one of my aunts was pushing supper through the meal slot. I backed against the wall like always, but I couldn't help it. Without thinking, I ran forward and grabbed her hand. Wish I hadn't. The second my hand touched hers, her skin turned black and brittle, like burned paper. It crept up her arms until the flesh peeled off her skull. her eyes smoldering with yellow fire. Blood ran out of her mouth, boiling. She screamed and screamed, but all I could do was sob, "I'm sorry," until security came. By the time they got to her, she was a shadow burned into the floor. The meal slot became automated after that. I finally understood. I really was sick, very sick. But it wasn't my safety I was in here for. I thought I would be here forever, a freak in a cage. Until last week, when all my aunts and uncles gathered in the chamber one morning with exciting news for me. I was cured. They told me the country needed me, that some government men needed my help on a big mission, where I could touch as many people as I wanted. Men in rubber suits were going to take me away to see the outside for the first time in forever. Just a few more days. I was so happy I couldn't help but cry. "And before you go, we have a gift," said one of my uncles, a smile beaming across his face. I waited, excited and confused at once. "Your name is Makatsura Yamamoto. You were born in a town called Nagasaki in the year 1945.
I was having a party with my friends in a small cabin when we were 17. I passed out on a bed and best mate crashed beside me. In the middle of the night, I woke up when the friend was above me, shaking me from my shoulders and saying firmly, "Hey buddy, this is serious. You need to wake up." As I opened my eyes, the whole cabin was on fire, and I could only see smoke, flames, and a window. Instinct kicked in, and I ran through the flames and jumped headfirst through the window. The friend who woke me up didn't make it out. Next day in the police interview, I told them just that. But they were just confused. Police said the friend was found under the bed and never as much as woke up. Had probably rolled off that shitty bed and under it. I know it wasn't him physically waking me up, but the memory of it is somehow one of the strongest memories I have. Whatever it was.
I used to live in an old house, one built during the Civil War era. It was previously lit by gas. The light fixtures had the gas pipes in them, but wired for electricity. One night I woke up around 2 a.m. and saw a ghostly figure, which looked like an old woman dressed in 1800s clothes. She put her hand on my chest, then put a finger to her mouth, then floated through the bedroom wall into the house next door. The next night I was chatting with my neighbor, and he asked if I believed in ghosts. He described that the night before he saw an old woman figure floating around in his backyard. And I described what I saw, and we looked at each other like, whoa. I was brushing my teeth late one night when I noticed something odd in the mirror. My reflection was a half second behind my movements, not much, but enough to make my stomach drop. I froze toothbrush halfway to my mouth. My reflection froze too. And then it smiled. I hadn't.
I used to live in a small college town, in an apartment complex just a short walk from the bars downtown. One weeknight, I stepped outside for a late cigarette. I brought my textbook with me and sat down on the porch stairs, trying to squeeze in some studying. That's when I noticed her. A girl I had never met, but who lived just one floor below me, was walking home alone from downtown. Even from a distance, I could tell she had been drinking. She stumbled into her apartment, barely getting the door shut, when out of nowhere, a man appeared. He knocked on her door. At 2:30 in the morning, she opened it. He introduced himself, like it was the most normal thing in the world. But something about it felt wrong. Who shows up at a stranger's door in the middle of the night? I stayed outside, pretending to read, but I was watching. They talked for over 10 minutes. Later, she told me she didn't know how to end it, that something about him felt off, but she didn't want to be rude. The whole time, he did these unnerving things, running his hand through her hair over and over, and inching himself closer to her doorway. I made a point of flipping pages loudly, letting him know he wasn't alone with her. After a while, he slipped away, vanishing as suddenly as he had appeared. We called the police. Days later, she and I sat down with a sketch artist. When the drawing went public, calls flooded in. The man turned out to be a serial He would follow women home from bars, pretending to be a cab driver, tricking them into his car. That night, she survived because she lived too close to the bars for him to use his usual routine. She got lucky.